What's up, guys? So today we're back with another video on video settings for the Nikon Z6ii. What they are, how to find them. Before we do it, you need to download the workbook. It's got a lot more information in it and it will make it a much smoother lesson for you guys. And so go ahead and pause it, do that, and while you're doing that, go ahead and subscribe. Okay, so now let's just jump right in. So the first thing that we need to do is, if you have it switched to the camera, you're going to switch it to the video. Then we're going to hit menu and go into the menu. We're going to go over to the video camera and we are going down to frame size, frame rate. Okay, so up here where we have 2160p, that is your 4K. So you have 3,840 pixels by 2,160 pixels. So the higher those numbers are, the higher resolution you will have and the larger your file sizes will be. So if you're just adding little video clips to set yourself apart for family, newborn photography, things like that, then you may as well just shoot in 1080p. 1080p is going to be beautiful. It'll be less file sizes for your computer to handle and to save. So now that we understand resolution, we're going to talk about your frame rate. Your frame rate is discussed as frames per second, or FPS. Your frames per second is going to determine, like if you want to do slow-mo or things like that. So the first thing you're going to want to decide is, do I want to do slow-mo or do I want the talking to line up with what's going on? So let's say you were doing a wedding ceremony and you wanted the vows to actually, you wanted it real time, then you would choose something like 24 frames per second, which is going to be closest to film look and it's going to be very cinematic. If you were going to say get, a baby, you were doing a sitter session and you wanted to do just a little bit of slower just to get the kinks and all the little jitters out, nobody's speaking obviously, then you would go to 30 frames per second. Now if you were wanting to do slow-mo and get that beautiful dreamy look, then you would want to do 60 frames per second or higher. Now the reason you choose more frames per second when you're going to want to do slow motion is because you have to fill in the gaps of, you're basically lengthening out the timeline, so you need more frames to fill in, and that's why. The Z6ii is amazing in that it has actual built-in slow motion, so to make editing a lot easier for you. But the next video I do, I'm actually going to show you how to edit 60 frames per second to make it slow motion. So that way, if you have like a Z5 or something and you're watching this video, you can actually extend it out in the same timeline as a 24 frames per second, which you may not know what I'm talking about. We'll get into that in the next video. So now that we are, deciding our frames per second, so we know what resolution we want. So let's say we want to do 1080p. Let's say we want to do slow motion, so 60 frames per second. That's going to determine our shutter speed. So our shutter speed is here. We access it with this dial. And when you're doing video, you always double the frame rate to get your shutter speed. So if we're doing 60 frames per second, which we are, then we're going to go 1/25th of a second. Not 1/20th because there's not one on the camera. So that's the closest we can go to that. Now let's say we were doing 24 frames per second. There is no 1/48th shutter speed, so we're going to go down to 50th of a second. So the next thing we're going to choose is your aperture, which you can access with the dial on the front here. And just, really as a crash course, the lower the number, the wider the aperture, and the more light you're letting in, and the shallower depth of field you will have. This is when you get the blurry background, and the blurry bokeh is when you're using a wider aperture. Now, if you want more in focus or you need to let less light in, then that's when you go up to higher apertures, say f8. When I'm shooting with a long lens video, a lot of times I'll go up to something like f11 just to make sure that I'm getting everything in focus, like when I use my 500mm for weddings and stuff like that. So when I'm shooting photography, a lot of times I'm down here. When I'm shooting video, a lot of times I'm up in this area, and the reason is because we have a focal point. When we're doing video, those people are moving or that baby is laughing, there's a focal point. We don't have to have such a separation between the background and the subject, in my opinion. So, and you can decide whatever you want to do. So I leave it around f3, f4. Then we have to decide on our ISO. The lowest ISO is the best ISO for your dynamic range. That means that you get more colors, more shadows, more highlights, all of that type of stuff. And so you want to stick down at the lowest you can, but if you're indoors and you're shooting an event or you're shooting a baby and you don't have a whole lot of light, you know, the Z6ii, these cameras can go up. I mean, shooting video, you could go up to ISO 2000 if you had to. But just as a rule of thumb, you shoot with the lowest ISO you possibly can get away with. Now, if you're outside and you want to shoot with a higher or a wider aperture and you want to shoot with a low ISO, that's when you want to invest in, and if you're going to do video, I suggest you do it anyway, getting a variable neutral density filter, and you just turn it as you go along and it'll get darker depending on how many stops of a neutral density filter that you've gotten. So now we'll go into focus zone. So we're going to stay in the video camera. And we are going to scroll down to focus mode. For this video, we're going to stay in AFF, which is full-time autofocus. And I'll show you AFC, which is continuous autofocus. And we're going to go outside and we're going to go into the AF area mode, which the Z6ii has a lot of really cool options. So let's go out and check these out. So now we're outside with the Z6ii and we're going to go into the focus modes. All right, guys, so we are going to go into the AF, the focus mode. Now I want you to see what happens here when we go into the focus mode. Auto area AF. There's a yellow dot, and what it's going to do is continuously focus on what I did. So back up a little bit. Okay, now come forward. Keep coming. Okay, so now if I go over to focus mode continuous, it's only going to follow while I'm holding it down. So walk back. So it's following him, but it's not focusing. Now turn around. Come up here. Okay, come up here. So it's not in focus, but now it will stay and it will follow him. Scoot back, but yeah, there you go. See, it's going to continue to focus as I hold down the button. Now come back up here. So I'm not holding the button down. Okay, so now we're going to go over to, we're going to put this back on AFF full time, AF area mode. Okay, so if we go to single point AF, that's going to be a small area, and whatever that point is on, it's going to focus on. And it's going to continue to focus on that point. Scoot back just a bit, sweetie. Not too, no, scoot over this way. See? Now, if we go to AF area mode, we'll go to people since we have these options here, which are awesome. We have long, we have people, It's gonna be a rectangle. Stand up, sweetie. And scoot back. So whatever's in the middle of that red square is what's going to be in focus. All right, sit down. So you see now it focuses on the background. And now let's go over to wide area square. Okay. Now stand up. So it's just a little bit of a larger square than that single point. So if you were doing, say, a wedding ceremony, that would be a good option because you could put this square, you know, wherever you wanted, and it's going to stay focused on that one spot. So like where their actual ceremony is. Now this one also has animals. Let's go to the animals one since he runs around like a crazy person. And then one other setting. Okay, move around a little bit. Come up here. You gotta be a little closer. Oh, careful now, bud. You okay? And then one other setting that we're gonna look at is we're gonna go into the eye menu. Okay, this vibration reduction you're gonna want on, this one you're gonna want off, and the reason is because that could cause some sort of distortion on your video. So, thanks so much for watching today, guys. Please subscribe if you found this video useful, and I will see you guys next time.